Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
I really can't believe I have to do this, but we're going to start with correcting the public record. There are now several YouTube channels that are pure AI. The voiceovers are AI and they sound nearly natural to most human beings. Their video editing is purely AI. The users of those channels, simply go to a website, enter a few prompts in, and they start spitting out videos. And there's one channel, I can't really name them per se, but that is spreading some heinously fake news because it's going to give hope where there is none. And I'm going to show you, not the channel in question, but I'm just going to show you how you can tell this is fake. And the news is this. According to these fake, deceitful, demonic AI channels, Pope Leo XIV has given Cardinal Burke a new job in Rome. It's not true, because if he had, it would have shown up here on the bulletin of the Holy See press office. You can check any of these stories by looking at the Holy See press office's bulletin. This is under the resignation and appointments tab for the 2nd of July, 2025. And here are the only appointments they named. A new bishop for Austin in the US and a new bishop for Nova Friburgo in Brazil. No Cardinal Burke. So we can go back here to the 1st of July. Odd resignations and appointments. A few more, but these are all for essentially dioceses in various places and then one apostolic visitator position. The point is, a lot of people are getting fooled by this. This, and even what I just showed you, isn't the most heinous. There are YouTube channels, I can never remember their names, but they always have Pope Leo XIV's name in their channel name. And that's how you know it's fake, where they will just generate a homily, clone the Pope's voice, and then upload these as if they're his homilies. And they're fooling a lot of people. The Pope never said the things he says in those homilies. You can always go check by going to the Vatican website and finding his homilies. They're all there for you to look at. And they're spreading fake news. People have to learn how to spot this. This is a new scourge on YouTube. Don't fall for the fake news. Maybe at some point I'll do a video exposing these channels directly, but that could cause a lot of internet drama, and I'm not sure I want to go there because that's not what my channel's about. Anyway, main story, forgive the diversion. But at this point, you had to have heard the news. Pope Francis had told us that one of the reasons for his promulgating Traditionis Custodes was that the Vatican had surveyed the world's bishops. I covered this yesterday, if you didn't see it. According to the survey data, according to what Francis and the official Vatican line was, the survey showed a majority of the world's bishops said the TLM was dangerous and fostered division in their dioceses. Yesterday, I covered how Diane Montagna published a report based on leaked survey data given to her by an unnamed source in Rome that showed that the official line from the Vatican and Pope Francis wasn't true at all, leading to a huge debate online about whether Francis lied to people and whether Leo is going to be forced to act. The debate is going on now, with some attacking Diane Montagna directly and saying that she's wrong about all of this or that trads deserve Traditionis Custodes even if Francis's reasons were faulty. Others pointing out that this is going to put pressure on Pope Leo to act one way or another on the traditional Mass. This pressure is taking many forms, and at the most basic level, I'm going to show you something here from Catholic Set, a X account that is a news aggregator and Vatican Observer on, again, it's over on Twitter or X. And he had this to say, and I think this is actually pretty cogent, the easy way for the Vatican to diffuse this whole problem. If the Vatican wants to defend the legacy of Pope Francis, it really should publish the results of the Summorum Pontificum survey of bishops in full. And they should absolutely do that. They should not rely on essentially hoping this goes away, which is probably how they're going to handle this. But there is growing pressure now for Leo to do something. And part of this pressure comes from, you had to have noticed this, you'll have traditionalists on one side claiming Pope Leo is a moderate who is friendly to tradition and is going to throw traditionalists a bunch of bones and do things to help make us happy while trying to keep the peace. And then the biggest Pope Francis friendly voices out there all say that Pope Leo is a continuation of Pope Francis in just more traditional looking garb. People are trying to make whatever they want out of him. Sooner or later, the facade is going to fall, whatever facade is, whichever one is the facade, and the truth will emerge. And for some people, they already think the truth is emerging, but it's not in the way that most people want to hear. This pressure, though, will probably help resolve this issue one way or the other. Pressure coming from Catholic sources comes from Info Vaticana, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I love this news source, but I don't like their website because it's a mess of pop-up ads, as you see them popping up already. And I can't use the apps that are used to prevent that from happening. They are a violation of YouTube's terms of services for me to use them. So I'm going to take the text of what you're about to hear. It's an open letter to the Pope. I'm just going to show it to you on basically a Word document. But it's called Your Holiness Restore Summorum Pontificum. This was published in Spanish. I have an English translation available, but you can just use a Google extension or you can use some other mechanism for doing it. We're going to go over this here. It's not terribly long like everything on Info Vaticana. But you're getting this pressure campaign, and it includes a lot of various different voices, including secular media outlets. So this is going to be a pressure campaign, and maybe something will happen in the church that diverts us from this. But I do suspect he's going to have to respond one way or the other. We'll see what the response is. But here is Info Vaticana's response in an open letter form to the Pope about the leak, the survey data to the public. The secret report that justified Traditionis Custodes has come to light, and it turns out it said exactly the opposite. There's no longer any excuse or room to delay the restoration of a functioning liturgical peace. What we have is an injustice that cries out to heaven. We knew that Traditionis Custodes was baseless. Now we have the proof. The report that supposedly motivated your predecessor to curtail the traditional Mass was literally the exact opposite of what we were told. The majority of bishops were satisfied with Summorum Pontificum, warned against any attempt to modify it, and noted its fruits of peace, unity, and vocations. The report, until now hidden, says it bluntly. What do we know? What do we do now with this evidence? Do we sit back and wait for the indignation to cool, like someone who lets a corpse decompose to avoid the scandal of the crime? Or do we act justly? The time for calculation and strategic prudence ended on July 1st, 2025, when the full text of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith's assessment was made public. What it shows is this: we were deceived. Francis said in his letter to the bishops the responses to the questionnaire persuaded him of the need to intervene. False. What persuaded any honest reader was the opposite, that modifying Summorum Pontificum would do more harm than good. That path toward unity was already working. That the faithful of the traditional liturgy were not the problem, but a growing pastoral treasure, especially among young people and converts. What was done then? The report was ignored. It was hidden. It was distorted. Traditionis Custodes was written as if what was brewing in the congregation were an outcry from episcopates terrified by the danger of traditionalism. And it wasn't. It was, we now know for sure, a full-blown ecclesial gaslighting operation. Your Holiness, your predecessor lied, and with that lie, he caused pain, division, humiliation, and persecution to priests and faithful, who were only asking for what the Church's law guaranteed them. You now have, providentially, the opportunity to act, not as a political act, nor as a tactical concession, but as an act of justice. And injustice is not repaired by letting it fester. The truth is not restored with timid reforms or discreet dispensations. What must be done is simple: restore Summorum Pontificum in its entirety. Just like that, without a press release, without nuances, without beating around the bush. As it was, a good, legitimate, effective law supported by the majority of the church pastors. It was already working. It was already bearing fruit. There was already peace. The report says where the bishops applied Summorum Pontificum with pastoral intelligence, the situation was completely pacified. The report says the majority of stable groups are composed of young people, converts, and faithful who have returned to the sacraments. The report says suppressing it will provoke a new liturgical war, possible schisms, and distrust of Rome. What else is needed? For Cardinal Roche to declare that the report never existed? For Gregorian chant to be banned again on the grounds of clerical papacy? Your Holiness, the time for diplomacy is past. Today it's your turn to undo the mess. And not in a year, not after the next synod, not even when consensus matures. Today. Let the people choose. That's what a Filipino bishop wrote at the end of the questionnaire. And that's what Benedict XVI repeated in France. Let no one feel rejected in the church. Legitimate liturgical freedom is not a whim nor a pious concession. It is the fruit of centuries of prayer, faith, and fidelity. The traditional Mass does not divide. What divides is lying about it, curtailing with arbitrary decrees, and treating it as a threat to be removed. The report is out. The masks have fallen. The world is watching. Restore Summorum Pontificum, Your Holiness. Don't do it out of nostalgia or pressure. Do it because it's right. Do it because it's true. Do it because it's time. That is the full letter, translated to English from Info Vaticana as an open letter to the Pope. Rorate Caeli issued a pair of rather blunt articles on their own. As you might expect, if you're familiar with Rorate Caeli, this is all pressure on one side, and I'm going to show you, of course, the flip side. First, an interesting report that they have from the church in Germany. Again, we're talking about the bishops who are the most far gone off the deep end. The biggest threat to actual unity in the church comes from the church in Germany. And their headline, even the German conference news website concedes Francis lied. The German bishops run their own news service, and they have a website for it. Several bishops' conferences do this. Whatever they publish is essentially the opinion of the German bishops, or it's an opinion that they want to give air to. And they even admit Francis lied. Here's the excerpt from this. Pope Francis appears to have ignored the advice of the bishops previously consulted worldwide when he restricted the traditional Latin Mass. According to the documents that have now become public, the response to a survey conducted by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith on the implementation of the rules for the pre-conciliar liturgy put in place by Pope Benedict XVI were significantly more positive than the Pope himself presented. That's Rorate Caeli adding emphasis to that. At this time, having considered the wishes expressed by the Episcopate, because he chose to present the bishop's hidden report prepared by the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith with strict reference to the answers presented by the Bishop of the World as a cause for his program of current limitation and future extinction of the traditional Latin Mass, says Rorate Caeli. Traditionis Custodes Francis said, at this time, having considered the wishes expressed by the Episcopate, and having heard the opinion of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. But that was a total and complete lie. He did not consider the wishes expressed by the Episcopate, he considered his own ideological wishes. That is Rorate Caeli stirring the pot a little bit. But the German bishops admit it wasn't true. The German bishops! They're the most troubling bishops in the whole church. Rorate Caeli with another one. Headline, Traditionis Custodes failed. The leak could have been strategic. This is from katholisch.de that they're reprinting here. Katholisch is a sort of a German and Austrian version of LifeSite News. It's not LifeSite News, but it's kind of that same kind of a website with a more moderate approach. But it's definitely a conservative and traditionally minded Catholic news site out of the Germanic countries. And they suggest that this was a strategic leak. Here's the reasoning. The leak could be strategic. For years, only the very negative feedback from the French Bishops' Conference on the survey by the then Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith on the Old Mass was known, completely in line with Francis. Yes, let's pause here. We knew that the French bishops responded very negatively to Summorum Pontificum, that when they were surveyed, they made public, very public, their opinions on the traditional Mass. They found it dangerous, divisive, subversive to the post-conciliar order. And they are like the biggest hotbed of traditionalism in the church, per capita. France has more per capita traditional Mass offerings and traditional vocations and all the rest. The French bishops are very opposed to that. A whole lot of bad news out of France is something I had to report on for the last few years. And they made it very public, their answer to that survey. Now that a new pope is in office who has repeatedly revived traditions abandoned by his predecessor, from the Corpus Christi procession and the handing over of pallia to new archbishops to the traditional vocation spot, a new picture is being painted. Francis had justified his restrictions of the quote-unquote Old Mass with the results of the survey he commissioned. If the official summary of the results now published by Vatican journalist Stine Montagna is genuine, he has emphasized the negative in a one-sided way. Most bishops do not seem to have found fault with Benedict's liberalization. Even the German Bishops' Conference, which is not suspected of traditionalism, is said to have spoken out in favor of maintaining the coexistence of the ordinary post-conciliar and extraordinary pre-conciliar forms. The leak at a favorable time could therefore now either prepare or attempt to promote a new change to the liturgical status quo by Pope Leo XIV, depending on its origin. And it goes on to declare that Traditionis Custodes has failed. That's obviously on its face true. Traditionis Custodes was meant to stamp out the fires of essentially pre-conciliar Catholicism. And the result has been, if you go to a traditional Mass, you can't help but notice that in the last 5 years, the attendance at the Mass has exploded. Oftentimes, you'll have people not able to sit in the pews. They're sitting out. They're sitting out elsewhere in the parish attending Mass because it's just standing room only. Where your parishes may not have had that problem 5 years ago, but now they do. There's a number of causes to this, including the shutdown of Masses in 2020, where some traditional parishes held out against it. Others was Traditionis Custodes. People decided to take the leap to see what all the big deal was about and found something that spoke to them deeply, and they started going to Mass there permanently. Traditionis Custodes failed. But even the secular media is reporting on this, and this is why I think we need to take the possibility that the Pope will have to respond in some way. The secular media is noticing. The AP reported on the leak, but now we go to not exactly my favorite news outlet of all time, ABC News, but they report on this. Headline: Debate over Latin Mass heats up after apparent leak of Vatican documents that undermine Pope Francis. The debate in the Catholic Church of the celebration of the old Latin Mass is heating up just as Pope Leo XIV's pontificate is getting underway. And it goes over a lot of the basics. You know all this stuff, leaked online, Diana Montagna, all this stuff. But here's what they have to say. If confirmed, the documents could add pressure on Leo to try to pacify the liturgical divisions that spread, especially in the United States, during Francis's 12-year papacy. Since the start of his pontificate, Leo has said his aim is unity and reconciliation in the Church, and many conservatives and traditionalists have pointed to the Latin Mass dispute as an area that requires urgent resolution. And he goes into Francis's explanations for this. And in general, it's a good summary if you're not familiar with the argument in general. But there are plenty of letters now being written to the Pope, as this article says, saying that the Pope needs to address this urgently. We'll see. Because as I've told you before multiple times, and I'm not the only one, popes hate undoing what their predecessors did. They hate it. They almost never do it. It's radical for them to do it. That's why it was so radical for Francis to undo much of the work of John Paul II at the Pontifical Academy for Life, and why it was so radical for Traditionis Custodes to do what he did. Damien Keller with a super chat. Thank you, sir. Bishop Reed of Boston wept after his first TLM. Yeah, I saw that. It's a screenshot going around. It's from X. There was a post on X, somebody asking, what were your experiences at your first TLM? And Bishop Reed of Boston described when he learned how to say the traditional Mass and he offered it for the first time, he wept. It's an interesting thing that could itself adds a little bit of pressure because you're getting a lot of positive reinforcement on this. Now, we'll go back to Catholic Sat here because he's got another take. Here you'll see his explanation for what Francis said, because it wasn't just the survey. There was also some other things from Francis's own writings that say why he restricted the traditional Mass. Catholic Sat posted this and did a very good job of reminding everybody it wasn't just the survey. Quote, Pope Francis said that the, quote, illness of nostalgia was part of his reasoning for issuing Traditionis Custodes. Quoting Francis directly, the danger today is inditrismo, the reaction against the modern. It is a nostalgic disease. This is why I decided that now the permission to celebrate according to the Roman Missal of 1962 is mandatory for all newly consecrated priests, meaning they have to get permission to even say the Mass from Rome. And almost no one's been given that permission. After all the necessary consultations, I decided this because I saw that the good pastoral measures put in place by John Paul II and Benedict XVI were being used in an ideological way to go backward. It was necessary to stop this inditrismo, which was not in the pastoral vision of my predecessors. And he said this in an interview in La Civiltà Cattolica, the biggest, most important Jesuit publication in the church. He said this on the record in the most authoritative, public-facing Catholic publication, that it was the ideology, as he called it. This is where we get the phrase indie-trists from, which isn't even a real word, by the way. I know, because I had a friend of mine whom I trust very much bring that word up to a theologically minded priest, and he said, that's not even a word, right? But it comes from there. This indie-trismo, he called it that it was an ideology, that traditionalism was a mere ideology, that we were just super nostalgic for the past and all the rest of that silliness. And Catholic Set's not the only one who pointed this out. See, the Pope splainers are using that phrasing to defend Francis, as you might expect. There's a lot of these kind of really bad defenses of Francis going on that I could easily just use to sort of dishonestly make them all look silly. But the most intelligent defense that I've seen so far from their side of things comes from Where Peter Is. Not a website I like citing very often, but credit where it's due. Mike Lewis is not a dumb person at all and can make a very good argument in defense of his position. And we should take what he has to say more seriously than people do. In this headline, will Pope Leo take on the traditionalists? Like I said at the beginning, there was an attempt by traditional Catholics and conservatives to essentially make Pope Leo into a moderate leaning in our way kind of person. And on the other side of that, the biggest Francis supporters all say that he is Francis II, with just a better disposition and dressing better. The truth will emerge if it hasn't already. He spends a lot of time on the leaked documents, going after Diane Montagna directly, citing the French bishop's very public survey results as to why the traditional mass was suppressed, quoting the same thing I told you from Pope Leo, from Cath Sat. And it goes with this: Pope Francis a liar. Again, this is from a supporter of Traditionis Custodes, someone who takes going after traditionalists like myself very seriously. It says, on July 16th, the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, by the way, Pope Francis promulgated the motu proprio Traditionis Custodes, which abrogated Summorum Pontificum and established new and more restrictive guidelines establishing the TLM. In his letter to the bishops accompanying it, Francis wrote that his predecessor's attempts to foster church unity by widening access to the TLM, quote, was exploited to widen the gaps, reinforce the divergences, and encourage disagreements that injure the church, block her path, and expose her to the peril of division. With the release of these documents, Montagna suggests that this leak provides a smoking gun, exposing as unfounded Pope Francis's stated reasons for releasing Traditionis Custodes. She writes, the overall assessment directly contradicts, therefore, the stated rationale for imposing Traditionis Custodes and raises serious questions about its credibility. Taking the overall assessment at its word, Montagna claims, quote, what the Vatican's overall assessment reveals is that the gaps, divergences, and disagreements stem more from a level of nescience, prejudice, and resistance of a minority of bishops to Summorum Pontificum than from any problems originating from adherence to the traditional Roman liturgy. And then he goes in to talk about how we all jumped on this, including some people who absolutely just hate our elder brothers. He likes to throw a term you can't use on YouTube around a lot to go after certain people. Here's a good example. Crisis Magazine editor Eric Sammons claimed on X almost everyone knew it was a lie from the beginning, both the supporters and critics of Traditionis Custodes. And here he goes in defense mode. Yet Pope Francis never stated that his decision was based on the survey results. He said the survey was among the factors that helped lead him to his decision. In his accompanying letter to Traditionis Custodes, Francis stated that the results have been carefully considered in the light of experience that has matured during these years. It is also likely that Francis did not consider the overall assessment to be a genuine synthesis of bishops' responses, but a position paper arguing for the retention of Summorum Pontificum. In the same letter, Francis wrote, quote, having considered the wishes expressed by the episcopate, and having heard the opinion of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, I now desire with this apostolic letter to press on ever more in the constant search for ecclesial communion. Francis said he considered the wishes of the world's bishops, presumably found in the 210 missing pages so far of the survey results, assuming the CDF chose to include them at all, that he heard the opinion of the CDF. Because, to put it frankly, the overall assessment reads like a tract by an apologist for traditionalism. Anyone familiar with Pope Francis's position on the traditionalist ideology should know that such a hollow propaganda piece that doesn't even mention, let alone acknowledge, the harmful tenets of the traditionalist agenda or the extremism of its public mouthpieces is as worthless as the paper it's printed on. The document is not reassurance that the TLM movement is not a problem. It's a sign that the problem has become manifest in the Roman Curia. And it goes on. He shreds the dubia, all this stuff. And he goes after the credibility of their assessment itself. And this is an important point. Have you noticed there have been a lot of moderate voices that have talked about this? There haven't been. There have been some, but not many. And that's kind of a problem. It feels like the other shoe is about to drop on this overall assessment. Chester, with a $10 super chat, thank you, sir, he says, would not Pope Leo have already known about this document when he became Pope? He must have known about this document already as being Pope. He still did nothing about it. You'd think so. If the traditional mass is even that much on his radar, it might not be. He may have bigger fish to fry that we don't know about. This is making it publicly, like public pressure being put on him. And we know that today, in fact, right now, there's a press conference going on in Rome in Italian about the enculturated votive mass for Laudato Si, care for our common home. And I would bet that tomorrow I'll be coming on here to tell you that at this press conference, Diane Montagna raised a stink. But the omitted pages from that report need to be published. They absolutely do. And we need to get the input of some moderate voices, because we're not really getting that. It's one of the things I've noticed. Some, sure. Now I'm going to point out here in the final bits of this live stream today, more pushback, because some of those are more interesting. First, you get Rich Rejo, who's definitely a Bergoglian himself. Great sources in Rome, though. I gotta give him credit. I don't know how a high school teacher got such good sources in Rome, because he's always right when he leaks information. But he goes after Diane Montagna directly. Certain journalists, quote unquote, spent the last 12 years trying to malign Pope Francis, and now even in death, continue trying to taint his legacy by using unnamed sources, spurious documents, and half-truths that prove nothing. Pope Francis was absolutely correct in issuing Traditionis Custodes, says the pro-Francis mouthpiece. The Pope can consult, but in the end, he is the decider. Francis chose to further the Church in light of the reforms of Vatican II. Pope Francis's legacy continues to live on through Pope Leo, who is calling for unity. And there you see these folks trying to sell you on the idea that Leo is essentially Francis II. Let me know if you agree with him in the comments, by the way, on that. But this is a shifting of the initial response from their side of things. I watched in real time as on their side of things, they went from Pope Francis was not lying to, well, it doesn't really matter that Francis is the decider. He can take input as he wants it and make his own decisions. Strictly speaking, that's true for the Roman pontiff. He can take as much input as he wants, and he can defy that input if he wants. Now, on the more sane side of things, let's turn to Dr. Anthony Esin, whom I have a report on for a different topic covering in my news video today. I do recommend it. He is one of the brighter minds in the church, and he is a moderate in tone, but definitely a traditionally minded Catholic. He's also a great translator of many classic works, including in modern English, he has a translation of Dante's Divine Comedy, the Inferno, the Purgatory, the Paradise, that makes it easy for you to understand without losing any of the actual nuance and meaning of the original work. He posted this to X. He says, I've read the document in Italian that Diane Montagna has posted, summing up the bishop's responses solicited by Pope Francis on questions regarding the implementation and the results of Summorum Pontificum. If anybody says it's a bogus document, all I can say is that is calumny, since you're imputing evil without a shred of evidence. But the document reads exactly as you would expect such a thing to read, though somewhat more literate and intelligent than most of what is drafted by any committee. There are no personal attacks on any specific person. There are expressions of respect and gratitude for John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis. There are objections raised and modest answers to the objections. No one is portrayed as wicked. That includes even large categories of persons. The Novus Ordo, the new Mass, is never disparaged, but the Old Rite is praised in specific terms, and it is suggested that the very presence of the Old Rite will have a fructifying, meaning strengthening, positive influence upon the new Mass, as Benedict XVI suggested. The document says that in most places, the implementation of Summorum Pontificum has been without trouble. The situation in general has been quite peaceful. We also hear that it's young people, not old codgers, who are drawn to the old rite, if for nothing else than that it provides something quite different from the over-talkative world around them. The document therefore recommends no change, and indeed warns that disrupting Summorum Pontificum would cause more harm than good. It might itself lead to schism, or might cause misguided people. I'm reporting here on what the document says to shift over to the SSPX. That's his way of not attacking SSPX supporters, by the way. This is certainly the case in the US. It is so in my diocese. There's a vibrant, very large TLM community in Nashua, which has long gotten on quite nicely with the bishop. It is a personal parish run by the FSSP. Were a new bishop to come in and try to suppress the community, there would be an uproar, and there's no reason for it. Suppose someone says, I attend the TLM because hearing gather us in makes me feel that it's just a silly game. Or someone else say, I attend the TLM because I can trust the priest to give a sermon informed by more than 2,000 years of Christian meditation on scripture than by political fads of our time. Or someone else says, I attend the TLM because there I pray old prayers that I'd never pray otherwise. Or at the TLM, I feel that my faith is strengthened because all the focus is on what transcends us. What's the answer to this? To say that you have to be moved by gather us in and by songs that are no better, that you have to accept the turning of a sermon into enviropolitics or something else you wouldn't have to get up on Sunday morning to find, that you should forget the old prayers? What is the response? And this is very solid analysis, as Dr. Taylor Marshall said in the replies. It's a direct response to the claims made by essentially Mike Lewis and others. There is nothing dishonest as so far as I've seen in that survey result. And all of this is making an environment of pressure put on the Pope. He is going to have to, I think, to act. He can try to ignore this, but ignoring this will not foster unity. He can take two approaches. He can say, in the name of unity, I'm going to support Traditionis Custodes, and continue with that and make some minor changes around the edges. Or he can say, in the name of unity, that he has to essentially throw his predecessor under the bus. That would be a remarkable thing for him to do, especially for someone who quotes Pope Francis as much as he does. Literally yesterday gave a homily for some day the Vatican observes on care for our common home, where he quoted Pope Francis from Laudato Si and Laudate Deum, the two encyclicals, or the pastoral letter and the encyclical on the environment that he published. He quoted those extensively and repeated verbatim things Francis said. For someone who has emphasized that he's in continuity with Francis, it would be remarkable. I will just warn people not to get their hopes up, and I'm waiting to see more moderate voices respond to this, because so far what we've had is traditionalists and moderate tone traditionalists on one side and Bergoglians on the other. That's what we've seen. But this will create pressure. Don't discount the social media presence of people and the influence that has in church affairs today. It's clear that they pay attention to what goes on social media. They've said as much under Francis, that they had people in their communications office paying attention to the Catholic blogosphere, to what Catholics are saying on Twitter and Facebook, and yes, watching and listening to all your favorite Catholic podcasters. So please say a prayer for whichever poor sap in the Vatican has to watch my show every day against their will. Please pray for them. They probably need it. Burn with a super chat. Thank you, sir. Pray for the reposed soul of Pope Francis, then tell him to intercede for the church and fix this. Well, that's definitely one way to do it. I will just tell you, I think most of my audience have a hard time with praying for the intercession of Pope Francis, but just moving themselves to do it. But I do think there's charity in praying for his soul as a general rule. Napoleon Solo does offer an alternative idea. He says Leo can just passively allow the TLM to flourish. True, but it doesn't answer the question. It doesn't answer the push that you've seen from certain dioceses to try to suppress it entirely. We saw that in Charlotte with their very curious response, and they said they were slowing down on what they were doing, saying that they would submit to any document that comes from Rome on this, which almost sounds like they got word that something is coming. It could be the case. I'm broadcasting this to you on the 3rd of July, 2025. Traditionis Custodes was published on the 16th of July, 2021, the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. They have a track record of doing weird things on Marian feast days. Did a video about that a couple of years ago. If something were coming, there would be something appropriate in either publishing something that breaks our hearts as people who want access to traditional Mass, or undoing Traditionis Custodes, or something in between, to do it on the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. So it could very well happen. And if it does, it might be that day. And if it isn't that day, I'd start looking to feast days coming up between now and October, because, and I say October because in the case of the Bishop of Charlotte, he made it sound like something was going to come in the fall, that there might be word that he would submit to coming in the fall. But there would be something appropriate in a kind of poetic sense of publishing something on the same day, on the anniversary of the day that Francis issued Traditionis Custodes. Philip says, Jesuits with degrees in communications advise some Pope Splainer channels. I'd love to see any published articles about that. That would be fascinating to know and to talk about, just as a general thing. Traditionalist Catholic says it would be damaging if he doesn't respond to this kerfuffle. I would think so. I do think it would be if he just tries to let it blow over, but we'd never know. There could be some big announcement that comes on something entirely different that's going to suck all the air out of this conversation and turn our attention to it. Whether it's dealing with the German bishops, because I've got some news stories I'm working on for next week that are just incredible about them, or it could be any number of other things. So we don't know. It could be he'll announce a trip to go visit the Eastern Orthodox in their homelands. That would be unprecedented. It was something Francis was rumored to be working on. So we don't know. Lori says, how could it be helpful to validate the SSPX but restrict other TLM? I don't see the logic. There has been whispers that the Vatican under Francis had tacitly approved the SSPX's request for new bishops, and we're just going to go over the choices the SSPX were going to promote, certain priests from among their own ranks, and that the Vatican would approve a consecration, thus ending all debate about the status of the SSPX at that point. There is this theory that doing so would allow them to push traditionalists to the SSPX and to similar groups, eliminate the TLM entirely in dioceses, thus corralling traditionalists. It's one theory. We shall see. We'll be talking about Brendan Kavanaugh. I don't know who Brendan Kavanaugh is, so I no. All right, folks. I'm curious what you think about this. And let me know in the comments, please. What's your take on this? Do you think the Pope is going to be pressured to act, or will they just ignore this until the next news cycle comes? If he does act, will it be in keeping with Francis? Will it be doing what that Infa Vaticana letter asks, the undoing of Summorum Pontificum? Will it be something in the middle? I don't expect much activity. And if it did, I wouldn't necessarily assume it to be positive, but that could be just my sort of negative disposition on the state of the church. But I could be wrong. I really would like to be wrong. But I'm curious what you think about this. So let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly does help. Sharing all of this on social media helps a lot too, especially to help combat misinformation like I opened this with. If you see, I'll say it again, if you see a YouTube channel with Pope Leo's name in the channel name, they are promoting fake news, literally making up homilies he's using and using technology to clone his voice and to make it sound like he's saying things that he's not saying. And those channels should be reported to YouTube. Don't fall for them. And it's not only to him. They're doing it to Bishop Robert Barron. They're doing it to Cardinal Burke. And it doesn't matter what you think of any of those people that I'm saying is this being done with. It's evil. Those channels should be ignored. And really, the use of AI in Catholic circles and in news channels more broadly is disturbing for more than just I don't care if someone makes a thumbnail with AI, but I do care if they're making their content with it. Anyway, thanks very much for tuning in today, folks. Pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.